What does it mean to man up? What does that mean to you when we say that phrase?
I think being responsible for the things you need to be responsible for. I think relating to the people you need to relate to. I think leading when it's necessary to lead. I think it's being accountable. I think it's about being honest. I think man up means you admit your mistakes. I mentioned to you, I spent many years watching film after a game, pointing out the mistakes of my players. And I got to the point where I made sure I put my mistakes on the film.
Awesome. Well, welcome to the Man Up Podcast. I'm super excited about our guest today. I have legendary coach Kerry Martin, Hall of Fame high school football coach, podcast host, mentor, I'm guessing at this stage in his life, probably to hundreds and hundreds of different young men. And probably more importantly for me, he's become a friend over the course of the last few months. So I'm really excited to have you here on the show today. And welcome.
I'm honored to be here, man. Honored to be asked. Excited to be a part of this. And I can't wait to have a discussion about culture and men and our place in the world right now. And I'm looking forward to it, Terry.
That's awesome. So our paths actually met the first time at the Man Up Adventure Camp, which I thought was interesting. And so there were some guys on our team that spoke very, very highly of you. And that kind of led to me asking you to be one of the speakers.
Yeah.
And at that point, we hadn't really met in person, and it was around a campfire. And I knew about 20 minutes in, like, wow, this is, kindred spirit, brother from another mother kind of thing. I was just hearing a little bit of your story of how it got you into your career. And then it was really neat to see one of the gentlemen that was there that weekend's lives changed. But I seen the interaction at a distance when he met you because he used to be one of your players.
Yeah.
And I thought, yeah, that's authentic. That's real. That's really what this whole weekend was about. So I want you to tell us a little bit about your journey into your career. But since I kind of started there, tell me a little bit about just your Man Up experience. You weren't able to be with us the whole weekend. You showed up kind of about halfway through. You spoke on a Saturday night for some of our listeners. The Man Up Adventure Camp starts on a Friday evening or afternoon. And then it goes Saturday, and then we're usually out about midday on Sunday.
Yeah.
And so you came about halfway through. Things were already kind of cranking to some degree. I'm always curious, what was the first impression?
Well, I was honored to be asked, and I was really excited to prepare a talk on the topic that you were asking me to talk about. Failure is not final. Leaving a legacy. What is the legacy you want to leave, and how do you want to leave that? And so I prepared that talk, and I felt it was in my comfort zone. Certainly, things that I believe in my heart, things I've talked about with my team, and so forth. But I did not have any idea what to expect because I'd never been a part of something like this, and I'm sure you've had the experience of coming into a situation in midstream can be difficult. Because the men here had already been here about 24 hours. And I almost felt like an interloper in some ways. I had not experienced whatever they had been through already. So I was coming in, I felt a little bit outside the box. Having said all that, Mark picks me up and drives me to the camp area. And I don't have an explanation for this other than something divine, but there was something that put me at ease within minutes of arrival. I prayed about it on the way here. I prayed about it, weeks leading up to it, and had my home team pray about it for me. And when I arrived here, there was a peace and a comfort that came over me. And sitting around that fire, I was at such ease in a strange environment around most of these men I didn't know. And the conversations just started, and I don't know. It's a hard thing to explain, but it was powerful, and I mean that. And I had the chance to speak, and I really felt engagement there from the men. The music moved me. I downloaded 2 of the songs we played on the way home in the car that night. And I got on the phone when I got to Harrisburg. I got on my phone, and I called people, and they could tell the excitement in my voice, Terry, that I felt something, and I was awful talkative. I was excited. I called my wife. I called my brother. I was sharing with them what I had just experienced, and I said to my brother, we need to go next year and make a commitment and be there for the weekend. I think special things are happening. So that's the honest assessment of what I experienced. I was on fire about it. I couldn't wait to tell people what I had experienced. I got asked about it, how was it, and couldn't wait to share.
Wow. I think most of us that were there could say it was like there was a moment of destiny. That almost sounds hyper spiritual, maybe borderline corny for some people,
Right.
but I had some of those same moments. It was like that group of men was supposed to be there on that hillside that weekend, and it was appointed, and it was different for everybody. Everybody's takeaway was different, which I always find that interesting. You think about sitting in church, and a pastor can deliver a message, and there can be 6 different people. Like, he was talking to me, or he was dealing with my past. I can't believe he knows what I went through on Monday. Yeah. It's how God can just take his word and apply it to different spots in his body. And I think that's kind of what happened. It was kind of.
Yeah, I think so too. And I'm sure for each individual, they had their own baggage they brought with them. They had their own issues they were dealing with. And my experience, I'm sure, was unique to what I was feeling and where I was at in my life. But I don't mind if someone thinks it's kind of corny or weird, or it's just the truth.
Yeah.
I don't have an explanation for it other than something beyond earthly stuff. I mean, it was palpable. I thought what I felt as soon as I walked up, and there was something. As I said, I came in apprehensive a little bit to come in the middle of it, but that subsided very quickly.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, April 18th this year, here at actually in a few weeks, we're doing kind of a reunion and a gathering. And so for guys that went last year, we're going to host this in Marion, I think at the Celebration Center.
Yeah.
And that's going to be kind of a preview of what to expect this year. We'll have some guys that will be sharing testimony of their experience and just some neat things we'll be unveiling that night. But it's also a great opportunity, like you said, maybe your brother or somebody, for people that are thinking about inviting someone. That's a great way for them to step in while we feed them, over a 2-hour period. We'll have some raffles. It'll be fun, but they will kind of get the vibe of what to expect for, this year's Man Up. We're expecting a lot of growth from that. Yes. So, the quicker we know on the front end, the better we can be prepared. So that's one of the reasons we're doing that event in April. And so what made you, and we'll switch gears here, but what made you want to be a venture captain this year? So for our audience that maybe doesn't know, the camp is broke down into groups of no more than 10 guys around a campfire.
Right.
And those are all led by what we call an adventure captain. And you've seen something, decide, I think I want to come back and be an adventure captain. What led you to that?
Well, I think wanting to have not just a taste of it, but to sit at the table and have the whole meal is how I would describe it. I mean, I think I got a taste of it, and I would be remiss if I had that feeling and that the impact it had on me, and then just to disregard that and say, well, that was enough, because it wasn't enough. I wanted more. I really wanted to experience more of that. And it wasn't just a thought of what it could do for me. It was a thought of people started coming to my mind. Now, I can't guarantee they'll all come, but they're all going to get an invite, because I think there are people that I know could greatly benefit from a gathering like that and need that escape from what's going on, sit with other men. There's something special. There's something that happens, I think, when women gather with women and men gather with men. There are men that are just different in the absence of women. They're more comfortable around men. They're more open. They're more honest. They're more vulnerable. Not all, but some. And I think I just feel like sometimes when you take that out of it and put men together and listen to other men's testimonies and listen to other men's struggles. I went to a couple of Promise Keeper rallies years and years ago, one in St. Louis, and I watched men admitting to things and being open to things and being open to change and trying to be better husbands and fathers in a way that I had never seen before. I was a young man when I went, but it had a profound impact on me. And I think Man Up is a version of that. I think it's a chance for me not only to have an impact on my life, but also invite some people that I think could really use this kind of experience.
That's awesome. So talk to us a little bit about your journey into your chosen career path, teacher, coach.
Well, I grew up, my father was a coach, a baseball coach, and I knew he was good. Every kid probably says that about their dad's coaching, but my dad truly was very unique in his style. My dad was a great teacher. My dad had a knack. Back in those days, you drafted your teams. My dad had a knack for finding talent that other people couldn't see. He had a knack for developing young boys into better players. My dad had a knack for maximizing practice time. He knew how to manage whatever facility we had that day, whether we were on the diamond or the batting cage. He knew how to get the most out of each facility. My dad knew how to take his foot off the gas sometimes when he could tell we needed a break, and also to mash the gas pedal down when it was time to make a move. He knew how to manage games. He knew how to manage a lineup. And I go through all these things to say that about my father. I didn't realize all of that when I was, 9, 10, 11, 12 years old. I think those planted seeds in me, because as I became a coach later on, and I look back at my father, he was doing things that have become really popular in the coaching profession right now. And I think stuff that people yearn for and work for and are writing books about and doing podcasts about, my father was doing in the 1970s. He had a knack for all of those things, and he did it year after year after year, and he won several city titles in Little League. And I don't think I appreciated the impact he had. I don't think I appreciated how good he was till much later. So I think that's those things. My dad used to drive me to certain places to watch coaches he respected and admired. He also took the time to point out coaches who he thought were making mistakes. I'll give you a quick example. We drove to Collinsville to watch a legendary coach named Virgil Fletcher, basketball coach. And my father took me to a Collinsville basketball game to watch Virgil Fletcher. And during the game, my father said, just watch Coach Fletcher. And there wasn't much to watch because he was just sitting with his legs crossed on the bench most of the time. But his teams were phenomenal every year. And my dad said, what do you notice? And I said, well, he's not saying much. And my dad's point was, he's done his coaching. His kids are prepared. It's time to let him play. And I'm sure he made adjustments and points, but he wasn't ranting and raving and pointing and screaming and yelling at the officials. He took me to another coach later that was animated, active, screaming, yelling. And my dad said, what do you see? And I said, man, that guy's really coaching hard. My dad goes, well, maybe he didn't coach enough during the week. So those kinds of things, my father, I think, was planting seeds in a young man. And my dad wasn't telling me to coach. But then along the way, I had an interaction with a young coach named Kerry Phillips. He was my sophomore football coach. And he really was one of the people outside my family, my dad coaching me and my older brother coaching me. My older brother was an excellent coach too, much like my dad. But Kerry Phillips was someone outside of my family that was the first to believe in me. I was a sophomore. I was a little behind my brothers in development. They matured fast. I matured slow. But Kerry Phillips believed in me and in a way that, you expect your dad and your brother to believe in you, but this guy believed in me, and it had a profound impact on me and my confidence. Then my senior year, we got a new football coach at Salem. Turned the program around. It impacted the school. It impacted the community. And so I would say those individuals, Terry, in my life were reasons without me even knowing. And I'm a senior in high school. I watched the impact this man had, Coach Buddy, Chuck Buddy. And I'm still 2 or 3 years away from deciding to be a coach. But I think my destiny was already in play. So I looked for some other things, went to community college, didn't know what I was going to do. When I made the decision to be a teacher and a coach, everything kind of fell into place about my desires and my passion.
I think one of the things interesting about your father, most people were going to watch the game. he was taking you to specifically to watch the coach.
Yeah.
I mean, that what a brilliant leadership moment. He obviously seen something in you without forcing his career choice on you,
Yeah.
which is pretty impactful. I also think it's pretty amazing as funny how as we get older, our parents get so much smarter.
It's so true. Yeah.
I hope my kids are listening to this.
Yeah. And I lost my dad in 2005, and I know we loved each other. We appreciated. He knows I appreciated his. I don't think I said enough. And what I just told you about my father and his coaching abilities, I probably never shared that specifically to him, and I wish I could have. I don't think in 2005 I was fully aware of the impact he had, and it's taken maybe a little bit towards my retirement. I've reflected more since I've retired. When you're in the business of coaching, I worried about reflection being detrimental to the next season. I didn't want to fall into some false pretense that past success would lead to future success. I wanted to stay hungry and humble each year, so I didn't reflect very much. So now here I am in 2023, 2024, retired. I've reflected more, and these things about people in my past have really come to light in a way they hadn't before.
How do you think that is shaping now? You probably have more time on your hands than you ever have. And now you're reflecting, and your own admission, you're realizing the impact that mentors had on your life. Is that driving you in a different direction to try to, and not to put words in your mouth, but to be intentional about opportunities and mentoring more people? I know you spent your life doing that as a coach, but now as you're reflecting, there's probably very specific things like that doesn't end with a career. You know what you did obviously was more a calling than it was a career. It was an assignment for you.
Yeah.
And assignment's in, but the calling remains the same. At this season, what do you think that looks like?
Well, I absolutely, it's more intentional, and now there's more time to do that. Rather than focus on the coaching side of it and the strategy and the play calling and the weight room and the speed training and all those things that occupy a head coach's time. Of course, you're still mentoring your staff and your players, but now I'm able to hopefully reach out beyond Marion High School more. And, the podcast that I do is interviewing coaches about the profession of coaching. And the whole purpose of it is to shed light on the job that these individuals are doing and the impact they're having and the heart of these individuals, because coaching is very much based on wins and losses and sound bites that people hear and little clips they hear there and maybe rumors and some social media criticism or whatever. I wanted to pull the curtain back and say, I'm going to show you in a 45-minute podcast or so. I want to reveal more about these individuals, and it has been so. I think that's part of what I'm trying to do is shed light on the profession, the job that these individuals are doing, help younger coaches navigate the rough waters of coaching. It's never been more challenging. Mentor some young players. We're doing some community work now, and you and I have had conversations about some prison ministry we're doing, but it's giving me more opportunities, I think, to take what I know impacted me, and now I've got time to share that in a broader sense in our communities.
Yeah, that's awesome. So tell the listeners the name of the podcast. We'll make sure we throw it in the show notes.
Yeah, it's called Coaches at Crown Brew Getting Coffee.
There you go.
We meet once a week at Crown Brew in Marion, a little coffee shop, and I interview coaches from all sports, men's and women's sports. We've done everything from dance and softball to football and basketball, and even interviewed some radio personalities who've been a part of interviewing coaches themselves for 30 years. So it's a broad array. It's just a conversation. A lot of them get nervous about it. And I'm like, you're having a cup of coffee with a fellow coach, having a conversation, and it's been a blessing to me. I think in ways I didn't even imagine. So I don't know how long it'll last, but I'm loving every minute of it. Thursday at 4:00 is my new game day, so I get excited about it. Yeah,
influencing the influencers. So if your younger self met you today, what would surprise them the most?
I think I mentioned earlier, I was a late bloomer. I was in the shadow of two older brothers that were much more successful in sports. There was an expectation when people saw my name that I would be as good as they were going to be, and I was a bit of a disappointment. I was a good player, but they were great players. I didn't really get out of their shadow until I was a senior in high school. And I had some success on the football field, even maybe beyond what they had done. I quarterbacked the first playoff team in Salem history, and it wasn't because of my abilities. It was because I was on a great team, but I was the quarterback of that team. And I felt like I finally emerged out of their shadow a bit, and they didn't put that on me. I put that on myself. I think if my younger self would see me today, and I think knowing how I was, be a bit surprised about, I think, I don't want to say maybe the confidence I have, the ability to lead that I show, especially at a younger age when I was a younger coach, which even surprised me when I was doing it at the time. But I think, I don't know when I was younger that I thought I could lead or mentor or influence or impact at the level I've been blessed to be able to do.
That's awesome. So kind of reverse that question a little bit. If you were able to go back and give advice to your 18-year-old self with as much life experience you have, what would that advice be?
I think surrounding yourself with the right people. You may have said this in your book. I read this recently, and your book's the most recent book I read, but experience is what we learn from what we do, and wisdom is what we learn from what others have done. Experience can be really impactful because you went through it, good or bad, but wisdom is that chance to look at what others have done and learn from their mistakes and also learn from their successes. I would tell my younger self, ask, read, listen, research. There is so many shortcuts to getting where you want to be by following the lead of successful people. If you want to go your own path, it can be done, but there's a lot of pitfalls in that you could have avoided by following the wisdom of others. And so I would just tell my younger self, whatever direction you're going to go in, if it's coaching or teaching, which I loved, find mentors. Yeah. Read the books, listen to others, ask great questions, do your research. Because I just feel like that to me has been a big part of my journey, was my willingness to stay humble and believe that every opportunity is an opportunity to learn, both adverse and success.
Well, and I think that's key what you just said there, because I was sitting there thinking as you were talking, probably the thing that holds back most of us as men is our pride gets in the way. Yeah. So we're not willing to reveal what we don't know when I'm sitting right next to somebody that I could ask, that could tell me how to maneuver this. It's almost like we laugh about our wives. We'll say we'll never stop and ask for directions. Yeah. Because if we did, we would admit we were lost.
That's right. Well,
so
yeah, I think I've been at enough football clinics and watched some of the greatest coaches of my generation, our generation, and I can remember their influence, but I also remember a lot of times watching them sit on the front row taking notes at 50, 60, 70 years of age, like they were the most locked in person at the clinic talk of someone else. Lifetime learners. Yeah. So if they've got things to learn, I read a quote when Bill Walsh was asked, the head coach of the Niners, was asked what made Jerry Rice and Joe Montana great. And he said they never got tired of the little details of the game. And I think that's, again, at some point, your pride, your ego gets in the way of those little things that got you where you want to get to. And we sometimes start taking shortcuts. But it's the little things in life that mean so much. And I think some of them are daily. Some of them are weekly, but the little things matter. Yeah. And that's being grateful and spend some time on the way here, finally turn the radio off, turn my phone off, and just spend some time in gratitude.
Yeah,
That'll change the way you think about things pretty quickly.
for sure. Well, that's the hope of really this podcast, is how can we give practical tips to men, because we know what our tendencies are. How can we recreate content that will be beneficial? We drop these on Friday, but Saturday through Thursday, where guys can, apply that. So talk to me about, if you had to think about the three most influential people in your life and how they've impacted you, who would come to mind?
I don't think I can separate mom and dad. Certainly, I had a great childhood, unconditional love, stable, loving, fun. My mom and dad, I would lump together as just those two gave me a great start in life. And that's something I see less and less of among my players and my students is they're starting, with taking a few steps back instead of a few steps forward. And that bothers me, but it doesn't mean you can't succeed, but it does make it more difficult. So I was blessed in that way. And then I think, certain coaches and teachers in my life, like Kirby Phillips, I mentioned him earlier. He was a great teacher. He was a great coach, but not just because he was smart about the game, but the way he related to young men at a time when you're sophomore in high school and you're at that crossroads of making some really big decisions about the person you want to be. And then I think beyond that, I've got two older brothers that certainly had a great influence on me. They were good examples to me. They were protectors of me. They're both very successful businessmen. They are godly men with great marriages. And so a lot of it is family. Some of it is coaching. But I've often said this. If someone said to me, what's the number one reason you've had success in your coaching and teaching career? It's because of the people the Lord has put into my life along the journey. I sit here today and I've got some success we can mention, but I made a lot of mistakes too. I've had to learn from those. I've made some coaching mistakes. I've made some relationship mistakes with players and others, and I've learned from those, and I think I've grown from those. But I think having the right people in your life helps keep those guardrails up. And it can be a pastor, it can be a teacher, it can be a friend. Don't tell me who you are, tell me who you walk with, and that reveals more about you. So I think, getting a chance to meet someone like you and just develop a friendship and have coffee and read your book and sit on a podcast with you, there's a profound influence of having that interaction with men like you and others in my life. Be very careful about those you walk with. And again, back to my younger self, yeah, that's a big thing is walk with the right people.
So I think this would be helpful for our listeners. Any books, podcasts, resources that just have a significant impact on you? Because I think sometimes when we think about mentors, sometimes as men, we almost view that as a weakness. And then you think about that. You look at all the people that are performing at the highest levels in their career paths, they all have coaches.
Yeah.
But yet many times for us as men, it's like we think that's a sign of weakness, and I don't need a counselor, I don't need a psychiatrist, or I don't need help. When we all do. And so I think sometimes just because some of those are personal relationships, obviously, but some of them, there's so many resources in the day and age we live in, that we can be mentored at a distance, and sometimes even from people that have passed on, because their wisdom and experience is still available to us in one form or fashion. So any books, podcasts, resources, significant impact?
First of all, I'll start with, if it's influence on my coaching career, certainly a book that comes to mind is a book called Season of Life. It's a book written about a coach that kind of turned the tables on traditional coaching, the old school style, what is called command and control kind of coaching, where I yell and scream and you obey, and we're going to use discipline and we're going to do this. And Joe Ehrman was part of a book. He was an NFL player and wrote a book about it being more about love and relationships. And boy, listen, in the old school days of coaching, that just doesn't sound like the Vince Lombardi that we all grew to know and love. But when you break it down and you look at the great coaches, they had ability to develop relationships. And I think, he was able to speak into the hearts of coaches in a way other people maybe couldn't have, because he was a player himself. He was a big, gruff guy who had a great NFL career. And that book, I know, changed a lot of coaches who maybe wanted to coach that way but didn't have the courage to step out and do it. You know, and I say this as not only as a plug, but also to be honest with you. Your book, Culture Near, I told you off camera a while back that I was using up highlighters. You know, culture is the buzzword in the business and athletic profession today, and without it, I don't know. Talent is lost in bad culture. Culture defeats strategy. Culture defeats talent. If you have culture, then the talent is better and the strategy becomes better. What your book did was it defined it better for me than anything I had read so far. It defined it. It laid it out. It put on paper a better definition, a more concise definition, everything from vision to goals to relationships to hiring. Because, you know, I'm a football coach, but I had to hire staff. I had to develop relationships. I had to set goals and have a mission statement. And those things, Terry, that your book was profound in that. And I mean that. I thought, where was this book 20 years ago when I really needed it? But it's wonderful. And I'm able now to take some of those principles and take the book and now share that with some of the young coaches I'm mentoring, giving you all the credit for that. So, and I think back other books, you know, I'll tell you a quick story. I had a good friend and I taught her daughter, and she was a friend, and her husband was dying of a brain tumor. He eventually passed away, but we'd been there to console her and the daughter and be there for them. And at some point, when after David had passed, she gave me a book by Jim Collins called Good to Great, and a business book, and I didn't read it, and I didn't have any interest in reading it. But every time I saw her, she asked me if I had read it. So at some point, I told my wife, I'm going to have to read that dang book because she will not stop asking me. And I read the book, and I thought it had a profound influence on my coaching about getting the right people on the bus, having a hedgehog mentality, not coaching everything, but defining who you are and who you want to be as a program, being able to face the uncomfortable truths about yourself, your program, your coaching, because sometimes that's the greatest advocate for change, is knowing the mistakes you're making and letting people be honest when you do make mistakes. So those kinds of things. But I always think about Good to Great being this book. So finally, when I saw her, not only could I say, yeah, I read the book, and it was amazing. And then lastly, I would say just from beginning to end, from my 17-year-old self to today, daily time in the Bible has been the most influential thing I've probably obviously ever read, and it's the thing that's been the steady influence of my life. So those books there's many more because I'm a big reader, but those books kind of jump out this morning.
What would you think would be the most important lesson you learned over your career?
You know, I think that it's not about you. Remaining humble, seeking the counsel and advice of others, building relationships with those people in your circle. Relationships allow you to be more trusting and more honest. I think it allows you to discipline players that need it. I think relationships are what are the key to keeping that marriage strong, keeping your family close, keeping your coaching staff together, breaking bread together, having community, laughter, having a great sense of humor, and taking the time to allow fun to creep in moments where maybe it's spontaneous, but it's okay because this is a cool moment.
Sounds a lot like good culture.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And I think there were times, Terry, where I would just be at practice and I would just stop coaching and just watch my coaches and just watch what they do. You can get so caught up in what you're doing. I just stop and watch them and listen. And I'd take my phone out sometimes. I'd video them, and I would tell my players afterwards. I didn't say much the last 20 minutes, so I wanted to watch my guys do their thing and let them know how fortunate they were to have coaches. And I think it's important for my coaches to know I recognized that I saw that. And I think The other thing I'd be remiss to not mention is I've been married almost 39 years. And you mentioned people influential in your life. And I mentioned coaches and parents and brothers. But my wife we've been married since 1985. And we got married young, but she was a great partner, the best friend I have. We can go on vacation, just the two of us, and we're fine with that. We can spend many quiet evenings at home, just the two of us. We can travel. We can do nothing together and still enjoy each other's company. We still make each other laugh. But I also know that there are times where she is the voice I need in my life, and she's very honest and can set me straight. Whether it's mistakes I made in a relationship, or she'll challenge me sometimes, and she's someone I can take a talk I'm going to do and try it on her first, and I'll get honest feedback from her. So I want to mention that because but yeah, that's a big part of this. I know you feel the same way, and I just feel like men need to hear a man talk about his wife because of her influence and her honesty and her love for me.
Yeah. My wife is my most trusted advisor. That's the truth. Biggest aha moment in your career, what would that be?
Biggest aha moment. I would say there is a moment when I was standing in a cafeteria at a school. My teaching career was good. My coaching career was at a crossroads of either being non-existent or going nowhere fast. The head coach surprisingly was leaving out of nowhere. I was approached in the cafeteria by an administrator who looked at me and said, "Hey, so-and-so is leaving." I'm like, "You're kidding." I mean, I'm his assistant coach. I didn't know it. And he said, "How would you like to be the head football coach at Sparta?" Now, I'm 25 years old. I had no business being a head football coach yet. For some reason, I said yes. Didn't ask the wife. Probably should have. I took the job in a cafeteria. I guess that was my interview. I guess, because I never had an interview. They just said, "Great." That was a profound moment for me to say yes to that opportunity. It set my life on a path from that point on at 25, and I got to coach some really special kids that first year. Those special kids and some really good guys that gathered around me for that season kind of got me started on a coaching career that would go ahead and last, 30, 35 years. It was an aha moment because I went home and looked at my wife and said, "Should I have said yes to that?" And she said, "You said yes because I think you're ready for this." And it wasn't that I was ready X's and O's wise, but I was ready to step up and lead those young men because I was afraid if I didn't lead them, somebody else would, maybe in the wrong direction, because this was not a job, Terry, that anybody was really applying for, because we were bad and had been bad at Sparta for many, many years. And it took some courage to say yes, maybe some courage I didn't know I had. And I went home and a little bit of a cold sweat thinking, okay, you got the job, now what are you going to do? So I think that's it for me, because that was a defining moment in my life.
Wow, that's another podcast. I've said yes to so many things that nobody was applying for, and I was definitely not qualified by the absence of competition, but what a learning experience. So let's go to our final four favorites. Have a little bit of fun. Favorite part of your morning routine?
First of all, just a chance to connect with the Lord and work out. That's how I start my day. And when I work out, it can be your podcast, it can be a podcast, it can be a sermon on YouTube, it can be something that while I'm working out physically, I feel like I'm feeding myself spiritually and mentally. So I'm getting this double dose of
Multitask.
yes. And so that's how I start almost every single day. That's the best part of my morning.
Awesome. Favorite way to unwind at the end of the day?
My wife and I watching something together. We're big Survivor fans. We have been since season 1, way back in 2000. We love to watch Survivor, old seasons, rewatch them. We like the psychology of the game, the challenges, the strategy of it. We watch movies together. We watch certain shows together. But that is my favorite way to unwind, is just my wife and I chilling in the living room, watching something together and into it together, and that's a great way to end my day.
Awesome. Favorite book that stands out?
Like I said, the Bible is, to me, and I know that's the answer. Oh, okay, said the Bible. But to me, it's the consistent go-to, every single day. There's something, it's funny, you can read Matthew, you can read Romans, you can read whatever, and wherever you're at in your life, the next time you read it, something else stands out. Something else is, a pastor may mention a passage and you're like, I've never thought of it that way. And it can change the way you perceive something. So I love how the book is as applicable today as it was 2,000 years ago. But the ability of that book to mentor to so many diverse people in so many different situations is remarkable.
Yeah. Bestsellers list, I think, for over 2,000 years.
Yeah.
It's pretty
Not
amazing.
bad.
Favorite magical moment you'll never forget?
Championship, 1996. I love the answers of the birth of your children, which of course, two great kids, and they're when they were brought into this world, everything changes. To think you go to the hospital and you come home with a human being is still mind blowing. But to me, that's kind of a gradual thing. You bring it home, you learn but if I had to pick out a singular moment that stands out outside of those kinds of answers, the birth of your kids, the marriage to your wife, it would be the championship we won in 1996 at Carterville. It was a surreal experience because I think it brought my family, my parents, my in-laws, everybody was alive when it happened. So I didn't have the regret my dad couldn't be there. He was there. It brought a community together that needed some healing after some bad stuff had happened a few years earlier. It brought a school together. It brought people together. It was more than just winning a ball game. It was really transformative in a lot of ways. And so that's something that, and it's been a cool thing to spend more time reflecting on that than I've done in the past. So because I didn't like to reflect too much on stuff. I'm afraid it would impact the current season. Well, I don't have a current season, so now I get to think back. And I'm writing a book on my coaching career.
That's awesome.
And I think I had a friend tell me when I began writing, he said, "You're gonna have some emotional moments." And I thought, what is he talking about? And here I am writing about my father. Here I am writing about coaches. Here I am writing about relationships, and getting emotional as I'm typing this thing out. And I did not, and I thought, dang, he was right. He told me this would happen, and it did. And I think it's brought some clarity to me. It's brought some great time and reflection about the value people have had in my life. So part of my ability to answer some of your questions today has come from the writing of that book.
When's that book going to come out?
I have no idea. It's a work in progress. I am up to a big part of the book. I'm up to the 1996 season. I'm going to spend some time interviewing some other people who were part of that, just because I feel like I want to get some outside perspectives to challenge my own perspective of it.
Yeah.
So I think that's a big part.
What's one piece of advice you'd give to our listeners today?
Relationships, value them, work on them, be appreciative, send a text, send an email, send a thank you card. Let people know exactly how you feel. There's nothing better than getting a written note, but if it's a text message, then do it. If If you're proud of someone, you want to be thankful for someone, even the ones that happen just out of the blue, man, just let people know what they mean to you. It matters in this world. And I think we are going through a situation. I see kids in crisis who are losing the ability to build relationships and communicate. And I think we need to make sure we're doing a good job of that ourselves and setting an example of that. That's the advice I would give.
Yeah, that's good. That's great advice. So we talk a lot here because we're dealing with men about just work-life balance, because it's really work integration. And I think sometimes it's much easier to go be a star at what we do in our career and then come home. Sometimes we feel like a failure.
Yeah.
Because what we're affirmed for and applauded for at work, we talked about this last time on the show, we're rewarded for being a multitasker when we're at work. When we come home and you're on the phone and your wife's trying to talk to you and you're trying to multitask, it doesn't work the same way. And so question would be is, what's one thing you're doing to help simplify your life? Because our lives are so busy and complex. If we're not careful, we push out the people that matter the most because we don't manage it right. Give us a piece of advice on what you're doing to simplify outside of retiring.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because retirement has brought about a lot of new things in my life. It's a new kind of busy. It's a busy that you're choosing, not one that's imposed on you because you're a teacher and a coach and you have to do certain things. I'm choosing certain busy now, but I think quiet time, Terry, is the big thing. I think, sometimes just getting away, and it can be just for a few minutes. It can be turn the noise off. I had discovered something that when I was in the shower, in the midst of wearing many hats as a coach and teacher and FCA leader and Sunday school teacher, whatever I was doing, I wore a lot of hats at certain points in my life. And I wondered one time, why was my clearest thinking taking place in the shower? It's because it was quiet. And I'm writing things on the shower door with my finger. I'm even drawing plays and thinking, wow, I never thought of. And I realized it's because there's no noise, just the shower.
Oh, that's so good.
So I think quiet time, we lack that in today. And I honestly believe that people are uncomfortable in quiet. They don't like it because they're not used to it. Absolutely. The radio is always on. The phone is always distracting us. The TV is on continuously. I have found that just having quiet time, as I mentioned earlier, I drove here today and turned everything off and just, I don't know. And sometimes no great thought comes to mind, but I just think clearing your head of the noise, I would say, is a big deal.
Yeah, I think, one of the things that was most surprising to me is when we were at the Man Up camp last year, during the middle of the day, we turned all the guys out to the woods.
Yeah.
And it's like, this is your 1 hour of solitude. And they have a little journal. And they just sit in a creek or next to a tree for an hour. And it's like, just write down what you think God's speaking to you. Yeah. And for some of them, it was such a foreign thought. I'm sure some marched into the woods like, well, I can't even remember the last time God spoke to me. But the problem is we don't do what you were talking about. We don't slow down long enough. The problem is not him speaking. The problem is on our end listening.
Amen.
And man, they were just riding away and coming back with things that were just so profound. They, later, many of them said we didn't want to come back. When the horn was blown to come back. And I thought, wow, how simple that is. You can do that in your backyard, but we don't.
But we don't.
And making that intentional was, it was pivotal to, what was happening in their lives for the whole weekend. I just thought it was interesting.
And I would suggest to people, start off small. Do it for 5 minutes. I wouldn't suggest, I'm going to do this for an hour tomorrow because it'll be the longest hour of your life. It does take some getting used to. And don't get me wrong, I still have to. I catch myself not doing it enough and saying, wait a second, I need that. So yeah, it's still a challenge because we're all busy. We all think we need to listen to this or watch this, but yeah, quiet time.
So what does it mean to man up? What does that mean to you when we say that phrase?
I think being responsible for the things you need to be responsible for. I think relating to the people you need to relate to. I think leading when it's necessary to lead. I think it's being accountable. I think it's about being honest. I think man up means you admit your mistakes. I mentioned to you, I spent many years watching film after a game, pointing out the mistakes of my players. And I got to the point where I made sure I put my mistakes on the film. It'd be a play that didn't work, And I would just tell them, that one's on me because I didn't call a good play. I didn't put you in the right situation. We didn't practice that skill enough for you to perform it well. I feel like those kinds of things matter. And so I think being man up just simply means fulfilling your responsibilities. And I think those responsibilities are not only marital, but they're fatherhood responsibilities, leadership in the business you're in, whatever that may be, is just being accountable to those things that you are supposed to be accountable to and for. And it's an everyday thing.
How's your definition of success changed over the years?
Yeah. Let me see if I can, I steal most of what I get when I say, but it's profound. Success is what you do, and significance is what you help others achieve. And I think you can get, in my business, success can become a powerful distraction. It can become what you start almost worshiping in some ways. It can become that idol. And I get it. I was guilty of it at times, and I had to pull the reins back and say, no, what really matters is not success, but significance. Am I making a difference in the midst of winning? Am I making a difference in lives? Or am I just winning? Because you can win and not really have a positive impact. So I tried to switch from just being, you want to win, of course, that never changes, but we wanted to win in such a way we were having significance in the lives of our players, our coaches, those in the periphery.
So good. Big difference between significance and success.
Yep.
How do you want to be remembered?
Person that tried to make a difference in a positive manner, tried to make someone's life better, tried to help them reach their potential, tried to make others feel valued. That's a big deal. And I think back to my parents letting me know I was valued and loved, and having a coach believe in me and making me feel valued. It changed me. Well, I think that's a big thing. It's just people, I want them to think of me maybe as a person that made an attempt at least to do that for others, try to make them feel valued, better, and as I said, maybe in some way tried to help them reach their potential.
That's so good. I was listening to a podcast on the way in here this morning, and this gentleman was talking about his book, but he talked about one of the guys that worked corporate in Ponderosa, and he was recalling his story. It's super ambitious young man in his early 20s, started out as a dishwasher, went to work at a Ponderosa, and he wanted to be a manager. He wanted to have his own store. And they kept telling him, you're too young, you're too young, you're too young. And he just wouldn't give up asking. He would prosper wherever he put his hand to. So they finally give him a store. I think it was store 319 in the Ponderosa chain. Well, out of the 319, this was the worst Ponderosa in the entire chain in Gary, Indiana. And so when he got there, he realized, probably from their perspective, is okay, the kid's not going to shut up, but he can't make it any worse.
Yeah.
And he sat down with the staff, and he did some very interesting things that I think at this point he was about 25 years old, that I wish I could say I would have done, but I wouldn't at 25 years old. And he sat down with the entire team, and for most of it, he began to study. They had the analytics on how they were measured in Ponderosa. And he looked, and, historically the people are coming to work late. They're coming to work in their uniforms, and they're dirty. The place here is unkept. He's like, whoa. And so he began to dig in. And what most leaders would do at that age is they would say, you're either going to show up on time, because that's why we have a time clock, or you're going to be terminated. Go home and wash your clothes and, have some self-respect, or don't bother coming back. He took a different approach, and he pulled his entire team together. And he began to go through all of these metrics of how we're measured. And he said, now here's the thing. He said, every Ponderosa is laid out the exact same way. We all have the exact same menu. we all have the exact same processes. So when they say that we're worst in 319 stores, they're saying we as a group are worse.
Can't blame anything else,
And
right?
can't blame anything else. And he said, so our goal is going to be, how do we go from worst to first in the next 2 years?
Wow.
Fast forward, he went from worst to first in 1 year.
Oh my gosh.
But he began to sit down and he began to spend time with his team. And he began to try to figure out why is this such a challenge to be late? Well, they were in a very economically challenged area.
Right.
And what he found out is a lot of his people didn't have their own transportation. They were relying on public transportation. And in northern Indiana, when they had snow, it became a challenge. And so rather than just buying them a bus ticket, on those days, he literally would go around and pick all of them up and bring them to work. And the interesting byproduct of that is in the transit time, he had so much time to get to know them as a person. So the dynamics of the relationship began to change. He began to dig in and, why are we showing up with, clothes that are dirty? Because they didn't have washing machines and they didn't have dryers. And he said the easy way out would have been give them a roll of quarters. He didn't. He would have them leave all of their clothes at work and he would take them home and wash them and he would launder them. And then he would give them back to them. And what he was doing is he was becoming a part of their lives, and that culture was being raised to an entirely different level. He took it a step further, and he would be at the funerals, he would be at the ball games, he would be invited, at the Thanksgiving dinners, and he would participate in all this. He'd become a part of their life, and he just went on and on and on. But how he approached that leadership on loving his team, and the culture changed, and they went from worst to first. Now he went on and done phenomenal things. Been a CEO, several different companies, but it was all because he invested into the lives of the people that were around him and how that influence altered and changed them.
Man, that's
powerful
you
stuff.
You've got to share I got to see that. That's amazing. That's great. That sums up so much of what we've talked about today, right there in a microcosm of exactly accountability, relationships. That's perfect.
Well, I mean, tomorrow as we're filming this today, tomorrow we're doing the ripple effect. And really, that's what that is all about. How can we bring a group of people together and realize, wow, I have that opportunity. I have influence. What am I doing with that?
Yeah.
And then being able to leave and kind of be that rock that gets thrown out in the pond and creates a ripple. And imagine the impact that man has had for generations.
Oh my
Not
gosh.
just impact his career.
Yeah.
He changed families, which in turn had generational impact.
That's exactly right.
So, rapid fire fun questions. 2 biggest pet peeves?
I think the big thing that stands out, I used to tell my class, and my players too, I can handle a lot of things, but disrespect's the thing I is non-negotiable for me. I mean, that's a pet peeve of mine. And I think people that refuse to admit mistakes, those are pet peeves, because we all make them. And let's be honest about it. And it's difficult for someone or for you to help someone when they are in a place where they just cannot admit their mistakes. And then the disrespect part, boy, if you don't have that, it creates a challenge in the classroom and on the field for me. Yeah.
If you had to eat one meal for the rest of your life, what would it be?
Steak and potatoes.
Yeah, I hear you. Man after my own heart. If you could have coffee with one historical figure, who would you choose?
I want to have a cup of Joe with Jesus.
Oh,
we got a lot to talk about.
You think he's a decaf guy or espresso?
I don't know.
I mean, he was in sandals. He's probably an espresso guy.
Yeah.
Time travel, past or future? Where would you go?
Oh, I'm a history teacher, so I'm a past guy. I'd like to have a cup of coffee with Abraham Lincoln too.
That's awesome.
So I'm a history teacher, so I've been through so many of these thoughts. I'd love to be in certain places and be a witness to some of these amazing events that have occurred.
Yeah, me too. I think we're going to end it right there. Wow, I've had a great time today. I appreciate you coming on the show. I think there's some content that we went over that will inspire some men out there. And I appreciate you being with us today.
I appreciate the invitation. Thank you, Terry.
Awesome. Well, guys, follow, share this program. If you think it encouraged you, maybe it'll encourage somebody else. And we'll see you next time on the Man Up Podcast. Hey, Terry Gwaltney here from the Man Up Podcast. Listen, I just want to tell you how much we appreciate you supporting the podcast, listening to it. We hope it's adding a ton of value to your life. Also want to ask you to do us a favor. If you could like and share this podcast on wherever you consume your social media content, whether that be YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, we would appreciate it. It just helps us get the word out so we can help more people. And maybe you've never experienced the Man Up Adventure Camp that we do in October. You can check out our Facebook or our website, manup-camp.com. Once again, I want to thank you for listening to the Man Up Podcast, and we'll see you soon.